Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for spending with us, the Active Directory Solutions team here at Manage Engine. Now, today's webinar is going to be focused on the password policy and the different types of policies and how efficient each one of them can be. Now, in today's world of upcoming technologies and hacking methods, we sometimes hear about in the news like top firms being compromised, and this leads us to one question. How safe is our organization from non-ethical hackers? Or whether the fact that the password we choose to configure for our accounts, is it really that strong and durable to avoid being compromised? Now, Microsoft Active Directory has been around for like 17 years, yet there are still so many confused administrators out there with regards to how the password policy works. So right now I'm going to head over to my domain controller, and here I'll just open my group policy management. So you can see that in this domain, there are currently 3 domain policies. One is the ADSSP workshop, then we have the SSP child test, and then we have the default domain policy, which is automatically there, or by default it's there when Active Directory is installed. So I'll just click on edit and I'll focus on the password policy details. So to go to the password policy details, we need to navigate via computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and password policy. So you can see that these are the configuration that Microsoft allows you to do. And the first one, and these are some of the obvious ones, so we'll start from the top. First one is enforce password history. Now the value is 24 passwords, which basically means that a user cannot type any of his last 24 passwords as a new password while changing or resetting. So this is very helpful as it prevents a user from typing old passwords. And the next one is basically maximum password age, and the value is 42 days. Now this value is basically a default value and it is configured in your default domain policy. And sometimes people wonder why 42 days? Well, if you think about it, a month has 4 weeks. That's like around 28 days. And then that's how Microsoft wants to say that you can keep your password for a month, after which we give you 2 weeks to change the password. So that's how the mentality is. Next is the minimum password age, and the value is 1. So imagine if minimum password age was not there. So if this wasn't there, then a user who wants or is desperate enough to change his password to an old password can just cycle through all the passwords, like 24 passwords. That is basically the 24 passwords is the password history. He can cycle through 24 of those passwords in one day and get back to his original old password. So in order to avoid this, in order to prevent this beating the system method, the minimum password age is 1 day. So now if a user sets or changes his password, then he has to wait for 1 complete day before he can set another password. So if he wants to desperately get back to his old password, he'll have to wait for 24 days, which is inconvenient and hence will not motivate him to do the same. Next is the minimum password length, and the value right now is 7 characters. Again, people argue what is a better length, whether it's 6 or 7 or 8. So I will talk about this topic later and I'll show you which one is a better length. Then next is the password complexity requirements, and these are the requirements that AD or Microsoft provides, and this consists of certain things like must contain uppercase, lowercase, should have a non-alphabetic character, should have a number that is from 0 to 9, then it should not have characters from your username, and it should have a minimum length of 6, etc. Again, these complexity requirements cannot be modified, and if you just double click on it and go to explain, these are the requirements. You can see it here, and these requirements cannot be modified, but only disabled or enabled. So with that, I've shown you what are the password policy details, and this is the values which you just saw right now are the default values present in the default domain policy when you install Active Directory. That is basically Active Directory out of the box has the default domain policy, only the default domain policy. There won't be any other policy associated with the domain, and this policy will consist of the password policies which I just showed you right now. Now, right now, like how a GPO is linked to this domain, such as ADSSP Workshop or SSP Child, you might wonder, why can't I just link a GPO to one of my OUs? Like in this case, I've already done it. That is, I've linked a GPO, that is Tom-GPO, to my OU Tom, and I've applied these password policies. I'll just show you. That is computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policy, and password policy. So currently the values of each of this is completely different from the default domain policy. The password history is 15, maximum password age is 28, and the minimum password length is 10. So now let me show you one more thing, and that is these are the OUs within my Tom OU, and it has these users, that is Eddie, Scott, then Tom, Joes, David, etc. So you might be wondering, I've just linked a GPO containing specific password policies to my Tom OU. Does that mean these password policy will be applied for these users as well? Well, sometimes if you use logic, it might be obvious, but it's a common misconception. When you apply a GPO to a particular OU, the users within that OU will not be affected with the password policy you have set. The users in the domain will always be having the domain policy which is linked to the domain. That is, if either of these policies were linked to the domain, that policy only will be what the user will be having. So then you'll be asking, what is the point of a GPO with password policy linked to an OU? Well, you realize that when I edited the GPO, I had to go to the computer configuration policies, Windows settings, and via that to the password policy. I went to the computer configuration. That just means that whatever password policy you have configured will apply only to the computer accounts in the OU. Yes, the computer accounts is what will be affected, and if an OU does not have a GPO, it will use or it will have the default domain policy. But if you link a GPO to the OU, then the computer accounts in that OU will follow the password policy within the GPO I linked. So the OU GPO will have a higher precedence over the domain GPO. And we have an acronym for that, and that is basically LSDOU. So the precedence starts with OU over domain, over sites, over local. So if an OU does not have a OU GPO, then it will just apply the default domain policy or the domain password policy. And in no situation will the policy be applied to the users, and only the domain password policy will be applied to the users. That is one of these. None of the OU GPO will be applied to the users. So that misconception has to be removed. And this is how it's always worked. And it can be news to some of you people over there, but this is how always the configuration was done. So, and that's how the password policy works and how the default domain policy works. Now, you might be wondering, if you just click on the default domain policy and you go to the settings, and if you go and show the security settings and go to the account policies, the settings you see right now is the settings that is applied to your users. Now, this again can be a misconception because it's not exactly required to be the same. If you have multiple policies within your domain, then you cannot depend on the default domain policy report to see what is your current policy, because the default domain policy only shows what policy you've configured for that policy. So if I go to ADSSP workshop and if I click on show, you can see that this is the policy that is configured for that domain policy. But if you want to know what is the default, what is the domain password policy that is being applied currently to all your users, then all you need to do is go to your command prompt. This can be an exercise for all you people, so you can just go to command prompt, type in secpol.msc, seccpol.msc, and here if you navigate via account policies, password policy, you can see that this is currently the domain policy of your domain. So if you just compare it with the default domain policy of mine, you can see that it is very much different from the secpol password policy shown. And in the secpol policy, you can see that the password history is 10 passwords, maximum password age is 5, and the minimum password length is 8. Whereas in the default domain policy, what we see is the password history is 24, maximum password age is 42, and the length as 7 characters. So who do you need to believe? It's basically secpol.msc. Default domain policy, if you just click on it and go to the settings, it just shows you what it is configured to be. It doesn't show whether if that is the current functioning policy. So with that, I have just covered the default. I have covered password policy details and the default password policy. Now, in Microsoft Windows 2000 and Windows Server 2003, only one password policy could be applied to all users in the domain. And these policies were the ones which I just talked about earlier. And next is the fine-grained password policy. Now, these policies were first introduced in Windows Server 2008. And this can be useful for maintaining multiple password policies for different users. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to head to my ADSI edit.msc. So this is how you can configure fine-grained policy. So here you go to CN ecosystem. So basically, let me start from the top. We have the domain, and here in the domain we have a container called system. Now within the container system, we have another container called password settings container. Now the password settings container, you can create an object within it like this. You see all these different objects. These are basically the PSO, that is password setting objects. And these objects you can configure a policy within them, a password policy. You can mention the length, the maximum password age, minimum password age, etc. And then you can apply it to specific users or groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make a new object here. So all you need to create a new object, you just have to right click on password settings container and click on new object. And you need to select the class. So that is basically by default, it's given as MSGS password settings. Click next. And then you follow on with the configuration, give a name for it, then you give a length, a password age, etc. Now once configured, you'll see the object as it is like this. And now we need to apply it to certain users. So you just double click it, go to the attribute editor and go to MSDS PSO applied. So there's this attribute called MSDS-PSO applies to. And if you just double click that, you can add particular user accounts or groups as well. So currently already 2 users have been added to this policy. And if I want, I can add more. I'll just add a group this time. That is the Tom organization group. And I'll click on OK and apply. And I've successfully done this. So now this can be very useful over the group policy management, as you can set multiple policies for different users. But if you see from this page here, will you be able to find out what password settings object is applied to which user? And I don't mean by asking whether you can go inside, click on attribute editor. No, that is possible by anyone. But a UI wise, is it possible for any of you? If it's possible for any of you to understand whether which user has this particular password container, etc. So, as you can see from this page itself, it's not possible. And we have a tool within Manage Engine, and that is the AD Manager Plus. So using that tool, we can find out which all users have what password container applied on it. So all you need to do is in the AD Manager tool, just log in, go to AD reports, and you can see there's a multitude of reports. Now within the reports, we have one particular report called all users. And here we have all the users, and I've specified to be within the Tom OU. And I'm going to add a particular column, that is PSO applied. And I'll just generate it. Just a second. And here you can see that the users Brian and Eddie have a password settings object applied on it. So from this report, you can see it, but on a normal basis, from just the ADSI edit, you won't be able to find out. And another thing is, unless you go and click on the attribute editor, you cannot find out which setting has what all configuration. So like in this case, I need to go to MSDS-maximum password age, and it's shown as 5 days. So you need to actually enter it and then click on the attributes to see what is the value or what is the policy configured. Again, there's no UI for this. So even though Microsoft came up with a brilliant new idea to implement multiple password policies, they didn't really think it through while making the UI, etc. It was just like a workaround, as maybe many people were complaining, and they just provide a solution, but not a brilliant one. So that's about how the fine-grained policies work. Now, an important point about this is again the fact that the fine-grained policies can be only applied to a user or a particular group. Again, here you cannot apply to an OU. And also, if there are multiple policies applied to one particular user, then there's an attribute called MSDS password settings precedence. So I'll just show that again. MSDS password settings precedence. And this value will determine what policy will be applied on the user. So if there are like 4 policies and they are in the order 1, 2, 3, 4, then the policy with the order 1 will be applied onto the user. And that's how the fine-grained policies work. So next, what I'm going to show you is some password attack strategies. So like I told you earlier, upcoming technologies, advanced hacking methods, and end of the day, Microsoft, the password policy requirements is still the same. Nothing's changed, except for the fact they introduced certain complexity requirements, minimum age, maximum age, length, everything else is same. Meanwhile, around you, firms are being compromised, security is being breached, and what we have to fight back against this, what Microsoft provides us, is very limited. And as an example, I'll be showing you. Now I have a software called Kane, and it is a very powerful tool for cracking passwords. So currently you can see that I have these users, and what I'm going to do is when I right click it, I have an option to dictionary attack it. Yes, dictionary attack is when you provide a dictionary of words and you use those words to attack your password and find out what exactly is your password. Now, you might be asking what might be the solution for this. Solution is simple. Don't use dictionary words. But you can't just say it, right? You need to enforce it. You need to make sure the users don't use dictionary words. And that is again not possible with the default Microsoft password policy, as there's no option like that. Next, we have the brute force attack. And this basically, if I just click on NTLM hashes, you can give a predefined set of characters. And here you can mention what might be the possible length from minimum to maximum. And then you can start attacking the password. So remember earlier I told you the confusion what password length should be maintained. Well, let's see what is the situation when you want to attack a password which is just 6 characters. So when I start the attack, you can see from the time left it's only 8 minutes. Yes, in 8 minutes if your password is only 6 characters, then in just 8 minutes your password will be found out if it belongs to one of these characters. Now what if I increase it to what I say like 7? It just increased to 4 hours. Exponential growth, but still 4 hours. I can wait for 4 hours if I want to find out the password of someone else. But now if you just increase the max password length to 8 and then start it, it'll become 7 days. Again, if you increase it to like 10, it'll become 25 years. Look at the growth from 7 minutes to 4 hours to 7 days to 25 years. Now you can see which is more important. So end of the day, when people have technologies like this to attack your password, we need to make sure we maintain a proper length and buy more time. So in a situation like this, definitely, I think a minimum password length of 10 is what is needed. And if you easily put a length like 14 or 15, then the attackers can just forget about hacking your password, as it will take like it'll take 10 raised to 9 years, which is impossible to beat. So you can just be satisfied that your password is safe. Again, Microsoft just provides a length. It does not ensure it, because in the complexity requirements, it just checks whether your password length is 6 characters or above, nothing more. So that's another method. And then we have other items like cryptanalysis attack and rainbow crack, etc. So I've been able to so I need to be able to compete with these technologies. Now each of these attacks, I've told you there's a way to combat it. But again, Microsoft does not provide this technology, and we might have to end up using other technologies. Now I know one such technology which makes sure we can apply multiple password policies to make sure that the appropriate users have stronger password. So imagine an organization, we have finance department, support department, admin department. Now in this scenario, you would consider that the admin and the finance are the most important departments. You would prefer them to have stronger passwords. Support, which doesn't, it's not like they don't matter, but they can they can continue with a normal decent password. But in terms of admin and finance, we definitely need to keep a stronger password. So with the default domain password policy, or the domain password policy, which I had shown you from group policy, if you try setting a strong password from this option here, then it will be applied to all the users. This will end up in users like support users not having strong password policies applied to them, and it'll be messed up. As in, if you want a password length of 10 or above for admin, it'll be also applied to users in support, which even they'll find it inconvenient because they have no reason to have a password so strong, as their work does not involve such things. So this way, the default domain password policy is useless. And then we have the ADSI edit, in which we can use the fine-grained policies. Again, fine-grained policies you can only apply to individual users or groups, and you cannot see which policy is applied to which user. So once you apply, then if you come back to it 1 week or 2 weeks later, you'll be confused. What happened? Which user has which policy? What policy has what configuration? Etc. And this can be really confusing. So even though this can be a solution, the implementation and the UI is inconvenient. So then, like I said earlier, I have this software or I have this technology that is the AD Self-Service Plus. And this tool not only does it allow you to reset your password or unlock your account or even change your password, it also has this new feature called the Password Policy Enforcer. So first I log in as the administrator, and here on the right side we have the domain settings, and you add a domain given the domain controller and mention the credentials, and you just go ahead with and you'll add the entire domain. And then we can go ahead to the configuration tab, and under self-service we have the password policy enforcer. Now before I start talking about the password policy enforcer, you might be wondering, true, this tool has a password policy enforcer, but how will it maintain different policies for different users or different OUs? So for that, you can go to the policy configuration, and here you can add a different policy. So currently I have this admin policy, and if I just click on select OUs and groups, you can see that it consists of users from the admin, OU, and users from the administrators group. And next I have finance. And if I click on this, you can see that it contains users from the finance OU. And if you want to create another OU, you can just, policy, you can just click on add new policy, type in the policy name. So in my case, it'll be support. And I'll give them an option to reset password, unlock account, and change password. I'll click on save. And I need to select a particular OU or group. So I'll just expand my Tom OU and click on support and give OK, and now save. So with that, I've defined three distinct policies: admin, finance, and support. Now we'll head over to the password policy enforcer. Now in the password policy enforcer, you can choose which policy you want to apply what. So like I said, even though fine grained password policy can apply this, can do the same thing. There's no UI for it, and what this tool provides is exactly that, a UI and convenience. So I choose a password policy, and again, now you can see within the password policy, once enabled, you have a lot of options. You can choose what the minimum password length should be. You can choose number of special characters to include. You can choose whether you need to use upper and lower case numbers, and certain things like prevent using palindrome as a password, disallow the use of a character more than twice, disallow use of 3 consecutive characters from username, etc. So even half of this, the Microsoft policies does not have. The password policy which you find in the domain policy, even half of these requirements is not shown in the complexity requirements. And then we have another thing called the blacklisted passwords. So if you mention a keyword over here like password or something else, then the user cannot type that word while typing his or while changing or resetting his password. And this is very useful, and it prevents use of common passwords like 123 or password, or certain very common words which people use just to get through the reset password process. So that is the admin, and you can see it's fairly secure with all these requirements enabled. Then let's go to the finance, which I believe is more important. So I'll enforce this, and I'm going to give a minimum password length of 10, and special characters to include 2. I'll make sure the password will begin with a letter. Again, here I'll prevent the use of patterns like password 123, etc. And so as you can see right now, this is really secure for a policy to be set for the finance department. And you can be sure that if the finance department manages to type a password which fulfills all this, the password is indeed very strong. So again, you can enforce this policy in the GINA CP, that is the Control Alt Delete screen, and the ADUC password reset through the password sync agent. Also, you can show this policy requirement in the reset and change password pages of AD Self-Service Plus. Now, yes, many people have the question, if I do enforce this policy, will it be enforced in all particular places, where like change password screen and ADUC? So in order to help you understand, I'll just Control Delete and click on change password. And you can see that now this is the password requirements, the requirements for the password shown right now. And basically, if you type in a password, let's type that. So if I type in a password which does not follow all these requirements, then it will show an error like this and it will not even change. So I'm sure this password which I just typed right now would have easily bypassed the password policy requirements of Microsoft, but because of the 80 Celsius plus policy, it has been rejected. Similarly, in the Active Directory user and computers, if I try changing the password here as well, the policy will be implemented only if the password sync agent which we have is configured. So that is something we need to install, and you can see more information about it from the password synchronizer page here. And in the important note, you can see install the password sync agent to synchronize native password changes and resets. So using this, you can make sure that the password policy is enforced even at the ADUC reset password level. So next, I'm going to show you a demo of the how the policy is enforced from the AD Celsius Plus. So I'll just log in as a user Tom Joes. And the first major thing what we do after logging in as a domain user into AD Celsius Plus is we need to enroll. And I'll be navigated to the enrollment tab where I need to choose two security questions. By default, the security question authentication method is the one enabled. So I'll just choose two questions. First question is, what is your mother's maiden name? Let me just type that answer. And the second question is the country you always jump to vacationing in. I'll type an answer as well and click on enroll. So let's just try from here, I guess. Continue. Now for the new password, G39K9B, and the password has been reset successfully. So this is how the password policy works from the AD Celsius Plus tool. And let me just head back home. So this is how it is useful. And we also have an upcoming technology, an enhancement for this password policy enforcer. And I mentioned to you about dictionary attacks. So in this screenshot, which I show you, this is basically a screenshot from the upcoming release. And the three more requirements have been added. One being the fact that you can disallow the use of dictionary words, and you can choose dictionary. So you can just choose a text file dictionary and you can import it, and when a user types a password, it will be cross-checked with that dictionary and accordingly disallowed. Next, we have the last one you can see is override all complexity rules if password length is greater than so and so. So this can be really helpful because if at all a user types a strong password, like something like 15, 16 characters, and you can easily correlate from the example I showed you earlier, the longer the password, the tougher to crack. So if a password length is greater than so and so, then we can override all complexity rules because we know that that password is strong. So that is another enhancement, and this will be coming. This will be coming soon in around 2 weeks. So keep your eyes out for that. Within the enhancements, we have one more thing, and that is we disallow the use of 5 consecutive characters from the old password. So like if you add a password something like hello at 123, if at all that was your password, then the next time you try to change your password, you will not be able to use something like hello at 1234 because it will contain consecutive characters from your old password. So this also is an improvement and enhancement which will be in the upcoming release. So let's summarize. So I showed you the password policy details, what like maximum age, minimum age, etc. And then I showed you the default password policy. So we learned that the default password policy is the policy that is applied to all the users in the domain. And if at all you add another GPO with the password policy and link it to the domain, then only will it be enforced to the users. If you link a GPO to an OU, it doesn't make a difference and it will only be applied to the computer accounts within it. Then I showed you the fine-grained password policies. And within the fine-grained password policy, I told you it supports multiple password policy. But again, you need to manually go and create an object and add the respective attributes such as password, maximum age, age, minimum length, etc. And you need to also go to the MSTS PSO applies to attribute. Yes, it's confusing, I know, but that's how Microsoft expects us to implement it. So you have to go there and add the user accounts one by one or the group accounts. Again, this is inconvenient. Next, we have is the password attack strategies, which I showed you. So I had this Kane software, and I showed you how I was brute force attacking a user's password and how it varied in the time taken. So when it was 6 characters, it said it'll take only like 7 minutes. And when it was like 8, it was showing 7 days. And when it was 10 or 15, it showed like years, 28 to 10 raised to 9 years. So that's a lot of, that is very important that your password length is longer. So I also showed you the dictionary attacks which can be done in this upcoming technologies and how Microsoft does not provide an alternative to combat it. And that's where we need to depend on other technologies such as AD Self-Service Plus. And in these policies, it allows you to have multiple password policy, and also like I showed you earlier, it allows you to configure different requirements like preventing use of blacklisted passwords or patterns, or prevent use of dictionary words, prevent using consecutive characters from old password, etc. So these are possible only from the tool AD Self-Service Plus. So if you want to download it for a free version, you can just head over to manageengine.com. Now within manageengine.com, we have this link called Active Directory, within which we have identity, password management, and IT self-service. And here on the right side, you can just click and download it. And if you download it, you'll have a trial license which will be of 30 days. And if you feel that was too less to experiment on this tool, you can always ask our support team and ask for more. And we'll be sure to provide you in order to make sure your experience is wonderful. So with that, we have come to the end of the session, and I hope this webinar was a very informative one to all of you, and I hope certain misconceptions have been removed and you have a different understanding, a total better understanding of how the password policy works and how we need to make sure the passwords we type or we change are safe from being compromised. So if any questions, please do let us know right now. Just mention in the chat. And also we have the survey. Also, if any questions regarding this AD Self-Service Plus, please be free to send a query to support@adselfserviceplus.com. So, and also feedback form will be mailed to you later on. So please give your feedback via it and help us improve our workshops and webinars. So I'm thankful to all of you. Have a wonderful day.